Hello and welcome. You're watching Head to Head. I'm Antonina Antosha with UATV. The Russian attack on the Ukrainian vessels in the Azov Sea on 25th of November was in the focus of attention during NATO's foreign ministers' meeting in Brussels, which concluded earlier this week. The meeting was also attended by the Ukrainian Minister of Foreign Affairs, Pavlo Klimkin. According to NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg, the mere fact that Ukrainian minister took part in this meeting must be seen as a serious signal for Moscow. To talk more about the relations between NATO and Ukraine in the light of escalation of Russian aggression, we're joined in the studio today by Ruslan Kermach. He's a political analyst at Ilko Kucheriv Democratic Initiatives Foundation. Hello, and thank you for being with us today.
Nice to meet you.
So let's talk more and in detail about the fact that Pavlo Klimkin took part in the NATO Foreign Ministers meeting. What actually could this mean for Moscow?
Well, definitely it's a good sign that NATO is not staying apart from the situation, from the conflict situation and its intensification in the Azov Sea region. But at the same time, we must say that, in fact, the Commission of Ukraine-NATO, which is one of the basic platforms through which Ukraine should collaborate with NATO, was blocked by Hungary. That's why we are seeking for other mechanisms of cooperation, and this was format like ad hoc format, elaborated especially for in the situation when Hungary is blocking this commission. Of course, definitely it's an important signal that NATO is focused on the situation, and there are, in other crisis situations, it was also stepping forward and demonstrating support for Ukraine in the situation. But it's more important which kind of decisions will be taken and which answers will be definitely elaborated and approved by NATO and other partners, international partners.
We'll talk about that a little later. Do you think that Ukraine and the whole international community should be expecting an answer from Kremlin, a reaction from Kremlin?
From Kremlin, to what? You mean to this?
To the fact that Klimkin was present at the NATO meeting in Brussels. I mean, by a reaction, what I meant was, is there going to be an escalation of the conflict that is currently happening in the Azov Sea? Well,
it depends on the, as I already said, on the decisions which will be taken by the NATO. If they decide to take more vessels to the Black Sea, it might intensify somehow and escalate the conflict in certain respect. At least Moscow is sending signals that they will regard the possible NATO naval presence in the Black Sea as such a sign, which could create certain tensions, but not reacting to what we have seen in the Kerch Strait area would be also a kind of invitation for Russia to further perform aggressively in the Azov Sea region.
But how is that actually possible that NATO could increase or even initiate its presence in the Kerch Strait, since Kerch Strait is not international waters officially?
Well, I expect that they might step up in the Black Sea and increase their presence in the Black Sea, but definitely not in the Azov Sea, in the Kerch Strait, because it would be quite riskful step on the one hand. On the other hand, to get to the Azov Sea, which was initially requested by President Poroshenko, will definitely not be such step taken because to do this, because it's internal waters of Russia and Ukraine, and the consent of both parts is necessary to perform this step. That's why they will definitely not go this way. But common patrolling of the Black Sea with Ukraine and Georgia, and maybe reinforcing the navy of Ukraine, it would be considered a kind of long-term reaction to this response to this challenge which we face. This might be taken, these steps. But of course, when we hear about sanctions which should be imposed on Russia, on Russian fleet, and on Russian vessels, like counter-actions, blocking Russian access to the European, for example, ports or something like this, we understand that NATO is not able to initiate these kind of things. Here should come, as Mike Pompeo already said, that they should elaborate a kind of collective response, and maybe it should involve not only NATO members but also the European Union and United States.
Speaking of the adequate response of the international community to the act of aggression performed by Russia in the Kerch Strait, I'm thinking that measures that everybody is already used to, meaning sanctions of the whole country or individuals, that could be okay. Intensifying NATO's presence in the Black Sea, that could be also okay. What about other things like, for example, blocking the construction of the Nord Stream 2 pipeline?
Well,
could this be a reason enough to block this project?
Yeah, frankly speaking, now the West, overall NATO and the partners, or international partners of Ukraine, are facing a really serious problem of elaborating a kind of response which, on the one hand, shouldn't escalate further the tensions, especially in the Black Sea, because let's be clear with this, Europe is not interested to have the World War III and wouldn't fight, well, they do not want to escalate it to the way in which Russia might respond. And we have seen that Russia is ready in some situations to overreact or to behave unpredictably, which seems quite irrational from the Western logic of perceiving and so on. But on the other hand, this response should be strong enough to be like a preemptive from possibility of other Russian aggressive steps. We should send clear signals that these kind of violations of international law and aggressive decisions, actions on the part of Russia are unacceptable. That's why it's about balancing and finding the right balance between this, and I'm thinking that the West will search for this, and maybe they will stop on kind of patrolling of the Black Sea region, a reinforcing monitoring mission, and there are certain signs that OSCE, the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, might play its role. Maybe kind of this mission will be introduced, and the fact that both Russia and Ukraine are parts of this platform, of this organization, is a good sign that it might be a good response. But I don't believe that they will go too far. And concerning the Nord Stream, well, already in the European Union were discussions about how to react to what occurred in the Kerch Strait, to this conflict situation, and it became clear that both Germany and France are not interested in using sanction instrument.
Yeah, Germany is
Germany
supportive.
Especially. Of course, we should consider the internal dynamics within the country and the economic lobby. I'm not a kind of expert in energy issues, but as far as I understand, at this stage of implementing Nord Stream project, it would be quite difficult to stop it from being fulfilled, but it would be it could be really a very significant step for Russia. It could send a substantial signal, but I'm quite, I would say, don't have much optimism about this. That this might be the step taken. Some kind of sanctioning personalities or vessels or ports, it's possible. But when it comes to such strategic step, in which also we must admit that Germany is quite interested, and its economic agents, I believe that we couldn't reach this ambitious goal.
Okay, the Foundation for Democratic Initiatives regularly monitors the attitude of Ukrainian population towards NATO. And I'm guessing that the outcome of that monitoring is quite different from what we had until the year 2014. So has it changed? What are the changes? How did it change?
Well, the changes are drastic. If we take this timescale from 2014, the changes are drastic because we have observed the increasing support for NATO in all of the macro regions of Ukraine, both in the west, center, and especially in the south and the east, where at that point of time, prior to the war, we have seen there were the level of support, for example, for NATO in Donbass was within the margin of error of kind of 2 or 3%, no more. Now it's around 20% or something like this. Of course, it is. Of course, we should consider that we do not conduct opinion polls on the territories which are occupied, and that's why it also changed a bit the balance for these regions. So in these indicators, it has certain impact on this, but definitely there were substantial growth over these years. But still, overall, when we take the all-national support, it's not over the 50% plus, which would be a sign of like a kind of consolidated.
It's a stable half of the population that is supportive
the latest
of NATO.
monitoring which we did, it was the highest margin, the highest indicator of support for NATO. In the question which we formulated, like which security option you support, NATO was supported by 47%. Now it dropped somewhat to 42%, and we see over the last years the growing support for non-aligned status of Ukraine. It's getting growth. It's around every third of the poll is supporting this, and especially the support is high in the east and the south. And then another challenge that this indicator of 42% is a kind of average between the prevalent support for NATO in the west and the center, where we have already in both macro regions reached this 50% plus, which gives us grounds to say that these regions are quite unified in support for NATO. And on the other hand, we see in the east and the south, NATO support is definitely lower, 2 or 3 times around like this, 20%. In the east, for example, in the south, and a little bit more in the eastern region. So there is still this discrepancy between the regions which we observe, and it creates certain preconditions, I would say, for political speculations around the topic of NATO. When political forces are seeking, certain political parties are seeking support in the east and south, they will play the NATO card and anti-NATO sentiments in these regions. And vice versa, political parties and forces which are oriented more on the electorate of the western central region, they would more galvanize the Euro-Atlantic agenda. It's the challenge. So I believe the biggest challenge and the task is to make, to somehow balance the support between the regions, because still we need, if NATO will decide at some point of time whether Ukraine should once, it has already decided in 2008 that once Ukraine will be the member of both Ukraine and Georgia and NATO, but now we see that due to the conflict and tensions which we now have, we must be realistic in acknowledging the fact that the growing tensions and the growing escalation of the conflict with Russia is getting us further from the membership perspective. Of course, in the part of cooperation, it intensified over the last years, but we must be realistic with the fact that NATO is more, and NATO members are more concerned about keeping security of the countries which are already in the alliance, and getting Ukraine in means in this current state of situation and relationship with the other members. Yeah, they will. It will be quite riskful for them to make. And if you will see the statements which were voiced by Jens Stoltenberg, General Secretary of NATO, he is quite firm and direct in saying that we are supporting and we will continue supporting Georgia on its way to membership. He's not doing such statements with regard to Ukraine, despite the fact that Ukraine was officially acknowledged as an aspirant state So that NATO, after our legal amendments, when we clearly defined the Euro-Atlantic perspective as our foreign policy priority, from this point NATO acknowledged the fact that we aspire, but they are not that direct in saying that they are supporting us, our movement. And of course,
hopefully anytime soon it's going to change. Thank you so much for coming here. That was Ruslan Kermach. He's a political analyst at Ilko, Kucheriv Democratic Initiatives Foundation. Thank you so much for watching UATV. Stay tuned for the rest.